creating conversations that you can share. It's what we do. Arrow.net, ARROE.net. Let's pod crash. Episode number 149 is with Leah Rothman from the podcast, The Real Killer.
Good morning. I'm doing well. Thank you. How are you?
Fantastic. Congratulations on this podcast, because it proves over and over again that, back in 1988, when those writers and those bloggers came together and said, look, we need to create something where we have a voice. This is absolute proof of it, because it starts with writing. Writing sells a story.
Yes, it's true. It's true. And also having a good story to write.
Yeah. And how about this story that you jumped into? I mean, is this something that tapped you on the shoulder, or how did you get into this?
I've told a version of this story before, and it was for television. And I just felt like I needed to go deeper. I don't know if you've ever experienced this before, but I couldn't shake it or the people in it. And, I've told a lot of stories before, and I've kept in touch with a lot of the people in them, at the center of them. But there was something about this story that I just have not been able to walk away from. And so here we are.
I can so relate with that, because I believe that we all carry the spirit of those the stories that we're trying to share. And they're walking beside us at all times going, are we going to talk about it now? Are we going to talk about it now? Well, come on. Right. Can we talk about it now? Give me a voice.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't know if I've heard anyone describe it quite that way and hit it exactly on the nail on the head. That's exactly how I feel. I feel like I could not walk away from the people in the story. Mm-hmm. Full stop.
Well, it reminds me so much of Russell Crowe in Brilliant Mind, in the way that he could see them. and it's like, wow, if it's working for him in this movie, we've all got to be doing this.
Yes, absolutely. And some people could ask, like, what's wrong with you? Why are you obsessing? Why can't you just move on? And it's like, I don't have an answer for you. Yeah. I don't have an answer. Leave me alone. I have to tell the story.
and now, did you start handwriting this out? Because this really seems like something that, Julia Cameron from The Artist Way will tell you, use your handwriting. Don't put your fingers on the keyboard. Did you use handwriting then?
Well, no, but I used to do The Artist's Way and write the morning pages. Yeah. I haven't done that in a long time. I should probably go back to that. I prefer handwriting to typing, but I actually did start with the keyboard mm-hmm. on the story. It's a story that has so many different facets to it, and so many characters whose lives were never really supposed to intersect. And, so there was a lot to tell. And again, like I've told it in a very short version, and to be able to tell it over the course of 11 episodes, I feel quite thankful.
But inside your heart, you have to be saying even 11 episodes isn't enough.
Oh, no, yeah. Absolutely not.
Right.
I mean, you know what? I've actually been asking myself this week, so how am I going to, I have to tell this again, maybe. Like, is it 20 next time? No, I mean, of course, you can never really fully tell the story. I mean, unless I sat and read, the trial transcripts from beginning to end. And, there's so much to the story. But I think that we do a good job of telling it, the best way possible.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things that I've always loved about podcasting, is the fact that you allow us as a journalist to step deeper into the story without being interrupted by a 20-minute commercial break and things like that. And when you've got a story like this with Melissa, who says that Rodney was the murderer, and then 33 years later, the story changes. Oh my God, you had me at hello.
Right. Right, absolutely. And just going back to even like doing a podcast versus doing television, I mean, not to date myself, but, if we go back to the old radio shows of War of the Worlds, and, I mean, it just allows a different kind of experience when learning a story. You allow your imagination to think about the smells and the sounds and the sights of the room as opposed to like TV, which I love. I mean, I'm obviously a huge fan of TV. I've spent a lot of years working in television, but there you're shown what you're supposed to see. Here you get to use your imagination while hearing people tell you the story.
I was going to ask you about that transition because, you being on Bravo and Fox and the History Channel and TLC, I mean, those come with pictures. On your podcast, you are designing those pictures for us.
Exactly. And, we spend some time talking about describing the crime scene photos, describing where Joann and her daughters, Melissa and Renee, lived, and, hopefully painting the picture of the world that these people came from. And that's what we have to do when it's just audio, right? I mean, we have to make you see it, feel it, and live it without it being plastered.
Plus, one of the things that you've mastered very well, and it's probably through television and stuff like that, is the pause. The way that you bring us into that pause, because we're drawn into your next thought, because the pause is absolutely evident there.
Thank you. I was going to say some of my pauses are a bit pregnant, but
I love it. It gives me a chance to breathe. It gives me a chance, to kind of get into that picture even more.
Yes. Well, I think there are a lot of things in the story that made me take pause. And it's I keep saying it, but it's just a story that I don't know if it's the fact that Joann was a single mom and I grew up with a single mom and I could identify with, some of what Melissa and the girls grew up with. I don't know what that connection is, but it's a strong one.
Building the episodes, I mean, you've got to be spot on when it comes to telling the history. You've got to have somebody that's going to go in there and double check, triple check, and make sure that we're telling the real deal here.
Yes, and I am one of those cuckoo people that has gone back maybe 16 or 17 times to make sure I got everything right, and hopefully I did. I mean, I know the story pretty well, but again, because I've only been able to tell so much of it, I also, in the course of making The Real Killer, learned so much. And, there are many moments in this reinvestigation of this case where I'm like, wait a minute, what? Or who? I've never heard of this person before. And, so I'm learning, as the audience is learning, I'm learning so much about this case as we go.
It's so interesting you bring that up because it reminds me of a conversation I recently had that it's about when it comes to this style of journaling, you've always got to have a microphone ready to rock and turn that baby on. And even if it means speaking into the smartphone, because you've got to capture that moment. Absolutely.
And I went to St. Louis to be back where it all happened. And I absolutely had to oh no, do you hear the garbage trucks?
No, that's fine. That's podcasting, baby. That's texture. I love it.
Hopefully they move through quickly. Oh my goodness. So you always have to have the camera. I mean, and I would be driving somewhere and I would just start talking about what I'm thinking and feeling in the moment, because also being back there where it all took place was scary and moving, and I wanted to capture it all. So yes, the short answer is yes, you always have to have the microphone ready.
Going back there. Oh my God. I mean, talk about, going back into those moments where the spooks are, or the spirit guides and keepers, because when my wife's mother was murdered and I went and I sat in the same exact closet where they found her body, I had to feel what was inside that room. I really did. I'm a freak, man, because I want to know the story.
Oh my gosh, my jaw's on the floor. I'm so sorry.
But the thing is, and her murder is still, they won't, they haven't figured out who did it. And the thing is, and this is leading up to the next question, in the way of how many people do you think you've bumped into that don't want to tell you the story because it means somebody's life is going to change. The real killer, their life is going to change.
I think with this story, it's a polarizing story because there are people who believe very strongly in the initial and original investigation and prosecution, and it serves them to stay the course with their original with Rodney, with Rodney. And then there are other people who are nervous but want to talk, or, some don't want to talk about who else they think may have done it. So it is on both sides of it, right? Like, there are people who don't want to talk for one reason and want to talk for other reasons. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Because what are the average person, what are they more afraid of? The police officers coming over to ask questions, or the journalist? Oh my God, the journalist is here. Right.
And, I try to treat everyone with absolute respect. And I talked to someone in Kansas who many believe might be the real killer.
Oh boy.
Yeah. And, I got to tell you, like, I was freaking out a little bit. And I was fascinated, and I hung on every word he said. And I'm like, is this the guy? Is this the guy? So, yeah.
Do you go into that mode when you hear a story like that? Because it's almost, I always tell people, it's got to be some form of meditation. When I hear something so authentic, it's like, I'm not going to react. I'm just going to take this in. I'm going to let it settle inside, and then I've got to figure out what I'm going to do with it.
Absolutely. I think the way I'm very much an observer.
Yep.
In life, and which is strange because now there's a podcast where I'm talking a lot, but I like to be the person who sits back and watches and is not the person, screaming for attention. Again, funny now that there's a podcast that I'm on, but I think I learn more by just observing and by saying less. And so I like to ask questions and then just let people answer. And I think I learn more that way than, some people have harder hitting ways of asking questions. And I think for me, I see people then clam up. Yep. If they, so I just like to let people talk and see what they say.
That's so funny you say that. You know what they call that, don't you? They call that the silent watcher. You are a silent watcher.
Yeah. I am. I think that's very true. Yes.
And I love it when people will dig their own hole, and you're just sitting there going, just keep going.
Why would I interrupt?
Right. Now, putting the podcast together, the length is obviously very, very important to a listener because, yes, I love me some Joe Rogan and some Mark Maron, but come on, 2 hours of a podcast is too much. When did you guys decide what was going to be the length of each episode?
As I was writing, it just sort of shook out that way. We have episodes that are, I think, just under 30 minutes. And I think the longest is roughly just under an hour, maybe like 55 minutes or somewhere around there. So I also listen to podcasts, and I have a certain attention span. And I also, 2 hours is too much for me. So I just felt like it needed to be somewhere within that range. And, obviously it's like, there's so much to pack into each episode, but that's the range. I think most people, is that the length of a car drive to work or to the grocery store? Or is it just like, okay, all right, I'm ready to move on. We have different levels of attention span. And I just think for me, I was selfishly thinking about what do I like to listen to.
Yeah.
And it's...
They always say that they call it a 20-minute drive, and it's because we're all 20 minutes away from something. And so I always try to put focus on, okay, so if the first 20 minutes is this, when they get back in the car or get back in the office, where is their mindset going to be, and will they pick up on it immediately?
Exactly. And I do. If I drive to the grocery store and I'm listening to something, I kind of also can't wait to get out of the grocery store so I can get back and pick up where I left off.
See, and that's the fun part about this. And, you made mention about how people used to sit around the radio and listen to those old stories. I swear I see that a lot now with podcasting, which is why it's never about talking to a group of people anymore. It's one-on-one. It's about having a conversation with one person.
Right. And yeah, absolutely. Right. And we're not even around water coolers anymore, right? So we're
Now, I got to ask you a question because you're so close to this story. Let's just say that it goes back to the courtroom and you're the lawyer. Would you put yourself on the stand with the knowledge that you have?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Ooh, you stumped me. I want to say yes, although I don't want to take the stand, but I've learned so much. And but I also think that after the audience listens, maybe they could be on the stand because they, we're learning it together. And yeah, that's a really good question. I'd like to say I'd like to get back to you on that one, but
Absolutely. No, I totally get it because it's like when I read murder mysteries and stuff like that. I always go put the author on the stand. They know who did it. I want to know what's going on.
Right. Like, again, not to date myself, but Murder, She Wrote. I used to watch that with my mom, and Jessica Fletcher always knew. She always solved it. I don't know what was going on in Cabot Cove, but there was a lot of murder in Cabot Cove.
So how did the community react to you when all of a sudden you started showing up in St. Louis? Did they embrace you, or were they like going, oh, hey, what's going on? What do you want to talk about?
I think both. I think there are two camps, very clearly defined camps in this story. And some want to talk and are willing to talk and are open books. And there are others who vetted me and said they would talk, and then I never heard back from them. So, I got both reactions. And it was interesting. You'll have to listen to the podcast to see who does what, but it was interesting to me about who was absolutely willing to talk, no questions about it, and who wasn't.
So now that you've got the podcast going, The Real Killer and stuff like that, and I don't know if you've watched the Steve Martin podcast show that he was doing for TV, where he and Martin Short, do it with Selena Gomez. But man, they put an identity on who we are as podcasters and how we like to dig in and get a story. But at the same time, there's a lot of things that we do that's quite funny.
Yes. I probably shouldn't say this, but how do you get used to the sound of your voice?
No,
your own
you don't.
voice?
No, you're going to hate it for your. Oh, it's so funny you say that, because when I lecture at universities and stuff like that, I say, no, you're not going to like your voice ever. Just trust in it. Just trust in it.
And I am getting used to it, but I'm telling you, it's a hard thing to get used to. I never thought I sounded like this, but I do. We're a funny bunch. And I think ultimately what I want to do is to serve the people in this story. And it really isn't about me. It's about the people who lived this awful, awful, awful crime and the results of that crime. And so my goal is just to make sure that I tell the best story, not only for them, but for the listeners, because that's what we're doing. You
know how authors are, as well as journalists and stuff like that. That next story is always right there in front of you. And I know that we've got 11 episodes of this. You're working on something new already. So can you talk about it, or is it still a big secret?
It's a secret. I wish I could share, but no, it's and I'm excited about it. But I wish I could share, but maybe next time we chat.
Well, because you know how listeners are. I mean, you're going to knock them dead with this with this podcast here, and then when they see you pop up again with another one, it's an automatic. They will start following you there too, and that's what I love about the journey of podcasting. They're coming with you. Even if they don't like you, they're going to come with you because they want something to complain about.
Right. It's true. And hopefully they get something good out of it too, right? Like I hope. Yeah.
Well, you plant Easter eggs. There are things that you're really good at that as you convince us to go to the next episode. You're planting Easter eggs throughout it.
Yeah, I mean, I hope is that people go along for the ride as the story unfolds. because it unfolds over the course of 4 decades, and it's tragic. It's actually a tragic story with the strongest people, with the deepest of determination, and I think that we can. And I hope listeners find themselves in these. I hate to say characters because they're not characters; they're real people.
Right.
But I think that there's a lot to learn. I think there's a lot that we can learn about ourselves in listening to this. And I hope from episode to episode, people are just in and want to know what happens next, because what happens next is even, I hate to say it, but crazier than what you just heard.
I love it. You got to come back to this show anytime in the future. The door is always going to be open for you.
Oh, thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking with you this morning.
Well, you be brilliant today, okay?
Thank you. You too.